5 years ago, he swore he'd never open that door again. In 5 years of solitude, 5 years of missing her, and 5 years of hoping against hope that one day she'll come back. Now the door was knocking. Who would it be? He thought it was just the wind. But then he heard it again. Someone was at his door. It was a stormy night, and whoever was out there wasn't knocking. It was more like tapping, as if they were trying to get his attention. Cautiously, he walked over to the door and peered through the peephole. There she was, drenched in the rain, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes pleading. He didn't hesitate. He knew he had to let her in. He opened the door and she stepped in, shaking the raindrops from her hair onto his welcome mat. The door closed behind her and neither of them spoke. The only sound was the relentless drumming of the rain. Finally, she lifted her head, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Can I come in until the rain stops?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He wanted to say yes, to pull her close and tell her everything would be all right. Instead, he found his voice. "Of course," he said, nodding toward the living room. She walked in, still soaked to the bone, her shoulders slumped. He watched her every move, his heart pounding in his chest. Where had she been all this time? Why had she come back now? All these questions raced through his mind, but he knew he'd have to wait until she was ready to answer them. In the meantime, he went to the linen closet, pulled out an old blanket, and walked back to where she sat. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and grateful. "Thank you," she whispered, wrapping the blanket around her shivering form. As she did, he noticed how much taller she seemed than the last time he saw her, how her hair cascaded down her shoulders like a silken waterfall. And when she turned to him, her eyes, oh those eyes, they held 1,000 unspoken words. Down. They sat in silence, watching the storm rage outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating the turmoil in her eyes. Thunder roared, echoing the turmoil in his heart. Silence between them was charged with electricity, buzzing with the potential for something more. "It's getting late," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I should probably go." He shook his head, unable to believe that she was already thinking about leaving. "Stay here," he said, his voice firm. "You're not going anywhere in this weather." She glanced at him, her eyes questioning, and then she nodded slowly, resigning herself to his decision. The hours passed, and the storm outside seemed to mirror their emotions. Wind howled, the rain poured, and the thunder boomed. He stole glances at her, memorizing every curve of her face, every rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. He wanted to reach out and touch her, to feel the warmth of her skin under his fingertips. But he held back, respecting the invisible barrier that still separated them. And then, as if sensing his longing, she turned to him, a sad smile gracing her lips. "I haven't changed at all, have I?" she asked, her voice soft. Wade, puzzled by her words. "What do you mean?" "I'm still the same girl who runs away from her problems," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The girl who leaves the people she loves behind." He reached out then, his fingers brushing against her arm. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't try to fix me. I'm not worth it." Her words stung, and he wanted to argue, to tell her that she was wrong. But he knew she was right. He couldn't fix her, could barely fix himself. The air grew heavy with unspoken words, and he knew he had to say something, anything to break the dam that had been holding back their emotions. "Why did you come back?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She met his gaze, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Because I missed you," she whispered. "I missed you so much." His heart lurched. Was this real? Was she actually telling him that she'd come back because she missed him? Because she loved him? He couldn't believe it, but he longed to. He stood up abruptly, unable to bear the intensity of her gaze any longer.
Ow.
He paced the room restlessly, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, he turned back to her, his eyes searching hers. "How could you just leave like that?" he asked, his voice cracking, without saying goodbye, without even a word of explanation. She winced at his words, her eyes downcast. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know what else to do. Could have at least stayed and fought for us," he said, his voice rising. "We had something good. You threw it all away." She stood up then, her eyes blazing with anger. "Don't you think I know that?" she shouted. You think I've spent the last 5 years wondering if I made the right decision?" Her voice cracked and he saw a tear roll down her cheek. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "I thought I was doing what was best." He shook his head. unable to believe that she'd come back after all this time, only to tell him that she'd left because she thought she was protecting him. The air thickened with emotion, and he could feel the tension building between them. Suddenly, she took a step toward him, her eyes locked onto his. He didn't move. Couldn't move. He just stood there frozen, staring into her eyes. She reached out then, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He flinched slightly but didn't pull away. Her touch was electrifying, sending shivers down his spine. She leaned closer, her breath warm on his neck. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that, but I never stopped loving you." He closed his eyes, savoring the moment, the sound of her voice, the feel of her touch. It was like a dream. Then he felt her lips on his, soft, tentative, yet full of longing. He opened his eyes and gazed down at her, his heart pounding in his chest. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more passionate. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, feeling the softness of her body against his. It was everything he'd ever dreamed of, everything he'd ever hoped for. When they finally pulled away, both were breathing heavily. He looked down at her, his eyes filled with love and desire. She met his gaze, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I want you," she whispered. "I want you so much." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Wait," he whispered, his voice husky with emotion. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her eyes locked onto his. "I'm sure." And then he leaned down and kissed her again, this time with even more passion, more hunger. He felt her body melt against his, felt her fingers tangle in his hair. The kiss was electric, charged with the energy of their reunited souls. He didn't want to break the spell, didn't want to break the kiss. But when she finally pulled away, he knew he had to do something. He had to show her that he loved her too. He led her to the bedroom, his eyes never leaving hers. He gently pushed her onto the bed, hovering above her, removed her blouse, his hands trembling slightly. When he turned back to her, her eyes were closed, her lips parted. He leaned down and kissed her again, this time tasting the sweetness of her lips, the softness of her skin. She moaned softly, her hands clutching his shirt. He responded to her every move, every touch, every sigh. As the night wore on, the storm outside finally began to subside. The rain slowed to a gentle patter. The wind died down to a whisper. Inside, however, the storm raged on, a wild, untamed tempest of passion and desire. He knew he had to stop, had to pull away before he hurt her, before he gave her a reason to run away again, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Not tonight. Not after waiting 5 years for her to come back. As dawn broke, the sky outside cleared, revealing the first rays of sunlight. The birds began to sing. The flowers outside the window unfurled their petals to greet the day. Inside, however, the night was far from over. He lay beside her, his body sated, his soul soaring. The physical act was over, but the emotional aftermath lingered. He felt her stir beside him and he watched as she stretched, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at him then, her gaze lingering on his face. A small smile touched her lips. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much." He smiled back, his heart overflowing with emotion. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered. "I waited for you, hoped for you, dreamed of you. Every day, for the last 5 years." She reached out then, her fingers tracing the lines on his face. "I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that," she whispered, "but I'm here now." And in that moment, he knew that she was right. The past was in the past. All that mattered was that she was back now. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, breathing in her scent, living in the moment. He didn't want to let go. He never wanted to let go. Suddenly, she pulled away, her eyes searching his. "You still love me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He stared back at her, his heart pounding in his chest. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered. The rain had stopped. Outside, the sun shone brightly. The birds sang merrily. The flowers bloomed in vibrant colors. But inside, the storm had just begun. So what will their reunion bring? Will they pick up from where they left off, or will new challenges arise? Stay tuned to find out in the next part of this captivating love story.